Let's talk about niching. So one of the things about niching that's just astounds me is that there is a lot of non-useful, almost disinformation, but it's not created as disinformation. It's just bad information that doesn't help. In fact, it oftentimes hurts more than helps, especially small business people as they're trying to niche. So let me just give you, so one piece of it is that it's supposed to be pronounced niche. It's like, where did that come from? Well, technically it is a French name. So I am the one mispronouncing it, but I just can't quite get myself to say niche. Okay. So two things that help in niching. Niching, the process of narrowing down your audience so that you're not having to spend a lot of time and effort, and most importantly, ad spend going to people who are not in your potential audience. So, number one, the core of niching is to niche on people who have a common problem. So most people think of focusing on people who fit in a certain group. That is far less powerful than people who have a common problem, because that's what we do. We are here to solve problems. So what you want to do is you want to collect a group of people who have that problem, because that's what you solve with your product. And what you really want to do is repel people without that problem, because that's good when you drive people away who don't have that problem. You don't want them in your audience in the first place. Oftentimes, those problems, when you ask people, what are your problems? Many times they can't answer that question. What they do is they express it as a need. So I need something that cleans both my hard water stains and my mold on my grout. Okay? By the way, that's a tough problem to solve. I'm frustrated by, or I'm frustrated that is another way that you hear them say it. Or I can't solve this problem. I can't seem to make this work. I can't. Those kinds of things are all the kinds of language that real people actually use when they're expressing what their problems are. So the number one, as I said, is a common problem. Second in priority, and much more important than it is considered to be second in priority, is some kind of category that they actually identify with. So something like, hey, moms of young children, or a marathon runner, or, and when you look at those big things, so people don't think of themselves as between 40 and 55, having 2 cars and live in a condo. That's not the way people think of themselves. That's language that comes from ad targeting. When on TV, we used to buy shows that people who fit those criteria watched. That's not niching, that's targeting. It's a different animal. I'll explain that in a little bit. And so try to find a term that they immediately identify with and that does not repel them. So I'm going to give you 2 cautions in this area. The first one is, don't use terms that they don't know. So oftentimes what will happen is that some new concept will come up in the industry, and because you're an industry insider, you'll know that people are now calling themselves this, when in reality, they're not. We as industry insiders are calling them that. They don't think of themselves as like that, especially if they don't understand that. And while we're on that subject, never use a term that you made up. The other day, I was going through somebody's thing, and this person kept using their brand name, calling them that kind of person. And it's like, wait a minute, they don't know that. That's a term you made up. They don't identify with that in the least. This is not the time for you to be branding. This is the time for you to get them to say, yes, I fit in your group. I have this problem and I'm this kind of person. Make it simple for them to do that. You always want to simplify inclusion in your niche. Then The second thing that I caution you with around this area of giving them of identifying what group they're in is be careful with the term small business person or small business owner. Why? Because most people don't consider themselves to be a small business owner. They first off identify themselves as an electrician or a chiropractor or a coach. Very few people, when you say you're a small business person, they think, no, I'm an electrician. They are a small business person, but they're identifying with a different thing. So it's really hard, just so that you know, to buy ads directed at small business people because people think of themselves as a plumber. So be very careful using that term. By the way, the replacement term for that is entrepreneur. That tends to work. Most people who fit that and have the problems common with entrepreneurs do that, okay? Now, I caution you also, this is part of that bad advice that I talked about getting too specific. So there is a whole thing out there where you take and you write up these detailed descriptions of your target audience, of your niche, okay? So oftentimes what ends up happening is you write that, so they ask you, what kind of car do they drive? What's their favorite color? What do they like to eat? What do they like to do on the weekends? You know what? Almost none of that is valuable at all. Okay? So, and very frankly, when you do that kind of exercise, it's very easy to isolate out your great potential buyers, especially if you really get into it and really start to own it. And one of the ways you do that is when you give them a name and a picture. What ends up happening is if you actually inculcate this into your organization, into your thought process, what you would start to do is, okay, you've identified Mary. She's 50 to 65 years old. She lives in the suburb. She drives an Audi, and she has 4 grandkids, and you start going down that path. What ends up happening is you forget that there are other people who have those exact same problems, who live in the city or they live in rural and maybe have skin of a different color and they speak in a different accent and all those pieces. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be inclusive rather than exclusive in this market. So when you're trying to niche, you're trying to repel the few people who don't have the same problem that you solve. But everybody else you're trying to attract into that niche. And so you want to be using languaging and examples and everything that brings those people in as opposed to excludes them. And what happens is oftentimes when you do this that in an exclusionary manner, you don't do it on purpose. It just naturally comes out of your mouth. And it happens because you did these long, detailed descriptions of who they are. You gave them a name, you gave them a picture and those kinds of things. And what ends up happening is you don't include so much of your audience. And more importantly, you tend to exclude people who don't look like the people that you initially imagined. And that's a mistake. So, one final caution about niching. Frankly, don't worry too much about this. There's a little known fact that almost nobody in the coaching and marketing training kind of thing ever brings up. And that is very few of the Fortune 500 businesses actually niche. Very, very few. There's a few software companies that do, but it's like toothpaste is like 97% of everyone. You don't niche toothpaste. You don't niche paper towels. You don't niche hotels. You target hotels. So they do what big companies do is they target. They try to. So go look at Marriott or Hyatt or something like that. What they've done is they've come in and they've built lines of hotels that are designed to attract somebody of a certain group. They don't repel. So let's say it's designed to attract a young family. If I sign up, because clearly I don't have a young family anymore. If I sign up and come to that hotel, they don't say, I'm sorry, you're too old, you can't stay here. But what they do is they build targeting elements. So this one's got a kitchen. It's got, some of the things that a young family might want to have that may or may not be attractive to me as an older person, but they're not niching me out. They're targeting people in. So recognize the difference between targeting and niching. Target. Niching is less important. So don't spend days and hours and everything really trying to niche, because frankly, that's not what builds big businesses. They don't niche. The whole concept of niching, just so that you know, came from the concept of ad spending. And what we did, because I was there during that time, is you'd say, I want to buy, what's the one where she turns over the letters? I can't remember what the name of that show is. I want to buy that show because that's the thing that people who are 65 and older tend to watch. They like the nightly news and they love that particular show. That's targeting. That's who we're after. So focus on attracting the people you want, not on excluding everyone else, unless they don't have the problems that you solve. Think about it that way. It'll save you hundreds of hours. It'll save you thousands of dollars working with somebody who wants to preach big time tight niching. And it'll build your business as a result, because you build your business on, I want to attract these kinds of people who have this kind of problem because that's what I solve. And then they'll want to buy from me because I solve their problems. Okay? Think about that right there. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.